Speaking of hardware, though, it's a good transition to the next article.
No kidding.
Because we are talking about some more regulation from the EU that could be influencing the way hardware is made.
This is good for the consumer, though. This is
Very
actually
good.
like pretty exciting.
Yeah, very good. This applies to the Steam Deck, the Rogue Ally, even the Switch. You can see some rippling effects from this. Pretty much anything with a battery, I think, is pretty much subject to any electronic with a battery at this point. It's kind of subject to it.
So excited.
But yeah, and this is a Windows Central. It's an article from Rebecca Spear, Windows Central. It's it's like a little bit opinionated, but I agree with it. So
so we're gonna treat like facts.
So yeah, it's facts. It's a frustrating but true fact that we've all experienced with our phones, laptops, gaming handhelds, and other electronics. Batteries degrade over time, making it so that eventually it cannot hold as much power or last as long. As many of us have experienced, my well-loved Steam Deck, sometimes I wish I had a Steam Deck,
Same, honestly.
The Steam Deck, so Rebecca's Steam Deck already doesn't have the best battery life, which is why she's sure she'll eventually have to replace the battery the minute it degrades to a horrible degree. This might be a whole lot sooner than later. And she said, I'm not looking forward to this, as the process of removing the battery is unreasonably difficult, which is illustrated in the some of the photos below. But yeah, it's no walk in the park to replace a lithium-ion battery that is stored in the Steam Deck. And that just goes for any mobile device. But thanks to some new battery regulation passed in the EU, it looks like Valve will be forced to manufacture new versions of the Steam Deck that feature replaceable batteries, even though it had no problems of releasing a new version anytime, or had no plans of releasing a new version anytime soon. I cannot even tell you how excited I am about this. I'm right there with you, Rebecca. I'm pretty excited. For one thing, having a Steam Deck designed with a replaceable battery gives more control over other game devices. It's so weird, like having to read this in like third person and
somebody else's
it's like I'm trying to
their first person point of view.
I'm trying to meld it into kind of a third person thing as I go.
I think you're doing well though.
Yeah, and so it ensures that that people will actually be able to fix their handhelds without accidentally breaking it, which I think is certainly if you're taking apart a Steam Deck, yeah, it's I don't know, just looking at the photo in the article, it's this is it's
like a pain, dude.
Yeah, it does. I mean, looking at this too, it's it's interesting for me because like I said, I think I got into a hobby, a few months back where I was like just taking apart electronics and stuff. It's cool to see, and it makes, I think if there was one thing I've like learned from it so far, it's kind of like yeah, there's something, especially newer devices, it's more difficult. But just seeing like there's things aren't necessarily as fragile as you may think. So and the way of actually cleaning electronics is a lot easier than you think as well. So you're trying to get into it. It's
that is so ironic. By the way, for the people that are just listening and like you're new to the show, this man didn't clean his PC for over 2 years and it was bottlenecking. So the fact that you're saying it's so much easier to like clean your electronics coming from you, I got to roast. I'm sorry.
I mean, I'll
take an opportunity.
I'll take it. I'm like that. I don't remember the last time I cleaned the dust on my PC, Mike. I'll be honest. I'm saying I might
gotta be real.
I took off that front panel. It'll be just caked.
I'll pull mine off maybe at the end of the episode. I haven't cleaned it in a while. I've noticed the dust piling up.
If you do it, I'll do it, dude. I'll take out the filter. You do.
All right. Fair enough.
For savvy Steam Deck fans, replacing the SSD and the fans has already been a popular hobby to improve the performance of the handheld. However, the act of replacing the battery has notoriously become a frustrating undertaking due to the amount of unnecessary work it takes. You see, the Steam Deck battery is tightly nestled between other components and is so strongly glued into place that it takes a long, patience-filled time to carefully pry up the adhesive and get it out. As such, it's very easy to get frustrated and damage the battery and the other components around it, even if you're using the proper prying tools. It's tempting to want to use heating to loosen the glue, but that can also prove to be extremely dangerous since damaging the Steam Deck battery can lead to swelling and not fitting properly, or even worse, catching fire later on. This made me hope that a newer version of the Steam Deck would make the battery easier to remove, but that didn't seem likely to happen in the near future. Just earlier this year, designer Lawrence Yang and engineer Pierre Loup. I was gonna say Pierre Loupe, but that's Pierre Loup. I'll say I was gonna say
Graphis?
gracias, but I don't,
Gracias? No,
like
no,
like
no.
gracias.
Pretty.
Uh,
I'm pretty sure that's a French last name.
Graphis. Yeah, I don't know. He explained in an interview that Valve didn't have plans to release a new Steam Deck model anytime soon. Quote, a true next gen deck with a significant bump in horsepower wouldn't be for a few years. Fortunately for my battery desires, things are a changing, as they say. This new EU battery regulation will require Valve to start making a new version with a replaceable battery at least. For further information, the Council of the EU's regulation on new batteries and waste batteries makes it so any company hoping to sell devices in the EU, including Valve, will have to make it possible for consumers to replace their own batteries in devices by 2027. So we have, a few years before it's kind of in full effect. And I know most recently, and something that's going to affect by the end of this year, is a lot of companies are having to take their devices, particularly Apple, I'm calling out here, for using proprietary Lightning on their devices. EU regulation passed years ago, and now it's getting to a point where by the end of this year, all devices being sold in the EU require that you utilize USB-C as your preferred charging port, and kind of making it one unified thing. Which I am, I mean, dude,
I'm stoked.
not only was Lightning just like annoying, but dude, the data transfer rates on a Lightning cable are trash because it was developed way like before the latest advancements USB technology kind of took off. And so yeah, data transfer rates were terrible. And like if you're shooting like ProRes video on an iPhone, I mean this is like ProRes like cinema camera grade footage. I mean the files were monsters, and trying to export that off an iPhone was a nightmare because you just had limited throughput. I could go on and on, but this is an example of the EU doing something, trying to help not only the consumers and their market, but also in turn helping the world because you got to sell devices in the EU.
That's the truth. Yeah, there's a lot of people in the EU. But I think more than the US, to be honest, collectively.
It's a huge
Um,
market for sure.
Definitely.
Um,
This is good. I'm pretty excited, man, because it's like this isn't only going to apply to the Steam Deck. It's going to apply to the Rogue Ally, the Nintendo Switch.
yeah,
There's a couple other ones that we covered, if I can remember. I can't remember. Logitech was making one too. The
yeah, the G
right
Cloud.
low.
It was a G
Yeah,
Cloud. Yeah.
yeah. I was trying to remember. I was like, there's definitely another one.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, dude, it's gonna be interesting for phones, right? I mean, just think
yeah,
about it.
that's
Like
the biggest
phones.
one.
I mean, phones are definitely gonna be affected too. So it's one of those things. I mean, I will say, the EU. It's interesting how the EU kind of gives grace to it. So it's kind of like if you're making these new
Oh
devices,
yeah,
okay, you
getting
have a few
prepared.
years. Like it's not just gonna be, we're just gonna enact this by the end of the year, so you have time to adjust to it, which is definitely needed, I think, for probably tech companies. But that also means that they're gonna find every single possible way that they could delay having to make this change until the very last like second. So I think that's
Yeah,
kind of what we're seeing, with I mean, it's kind of what we see with Apple and all those companies. Like they're not making this change until then, and it's going to be the newest model phone that comes out in September is going to be it's probably going to have USB-C now. So they kind of waited till the last minute, but I mean, it's kind of the way it is, and I'm sure it's a huge undertaking and for some companies, but I think overall it's yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be good. It's seeing one thing I'm always jealous of when it comes to like Android phones or anything like that is like a lot of the older models had just replaceable batteries. So
oh
if your
yeah.
battery ballooned, you could just get a new one. So yeah, I
Balloon.
mean, dude, yeah,
Yeah.
they get dangerous, man.
If
They
uh,
get dangerous.
they don't really balloon anymore, but they do definitely degrade a little bit. It's like they degrade. There's two problems that happens with the mobile phones. Is one, they degrade over time, so they just start losing their charge.
Yeah,
Two, every time they do like a new service update to make the game more efficient, every single one of these like developers know that your battery is degrading over time, and they probably have like some type of like graph chart or something about like how old your phone is based on the degrade time, because there is a yield property that's like the battery life will degrade. Um, Make it less likely to have like a stronger, fuller charge for longer periods of time.
right. Yeah,
But they'll take that into account. They can either say, okay, well, do we lower the power and the efficiency of that device so the battery lasts longer, or do we keep doing what we're doing, make sure that you still get the same amount of power, and then like further degrading, further making it so like your phone dies pretty quickly. It's like my phone now is about 6 years old, coming up on six, I think. It's pretty old. Like
yeah.
I'll say 4.5 because I like adding a year every now and then. So 4.5 going on 5. And that guy can't hold a full charge for like longer than 7 hours. Which tells me it's like if I go out of town and I don't have a charge, my phone's dead
I mean,
unless I
yeah.
switch everything off, you know?
Man, dude, yeah, it's like that with electronics. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's definitely, definitely degrades over time. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it was funny seeing companies that like intentionally degraded the battery because it was kind of like they,
Apple.
yeah, I mean, Apple, like they were arguing the point that they either had to like take away like either like degrade the battery or the CPU or something like that. They couldn't like have both, which is really weird. And
Right.
it just ended up being a whole thing. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Didn't make a whole lot of sense.
yeah, definitely didn't. Um,
Uh,
I mean, yeah, the article continues to go on a little bit. It says, of course, this means that Valve will need to start manufacturing new versions of the Steam Deck that come with intentionally replaceable batteries, thus removing the frustrating hassle we currently deal with. Uh, I expect Rebecca expects that the new Steam Deck will be much like what the Switch OLED was, the Nintendo Switch, where most of the components were exactly the same. Say one or two semi-big changes. Zhang previously told us the next gen deck likely won't release for another few years yet. This regulation will require the same replacement batteries rules for Nintendo Switch, Asus ROG Ally, and virtually any other device for the battery as well. Since it applies to all waste portable batteries, electric vehicle batteries, industrial batteries, starting, lighting, and ignition batteries. Used mostly on vehicles and machinery, and batteries for light means of transportation, whether it's e-bikes, mopeds, e-scooters. Now, it's possible that Valve would only make this change to the Steam Deck units headed to the EU markets. However, I would also agree with Becky here and say that it's probably not going to happen. If anything, it's like just make it for everybody. It's such a hassle to like have different versions for different regions, and I feel like that's kind of just more trouble than it's worth.
yeah,
And
it's pretty tough.
Just release for everyone at that point. Hmm. But yeah, some of these third-party Steam Deck batteries, yeah, I mean, this will give retailers, this is gonna give many retailers to probably release third-party batteries as well. Some of these third-party Steam Deck batteries might even be far more powerful than the Valve makes itself, which is a happy thought indeed. Yeah, that's another thing too. It's like you like components like this where it's like replaceable and you can and there may not necessarily be like a major patent on it. Then all these companies can try and make their own versions. And yeah, I mean, dude, dude, I don't know. This just reminds me of like storage and like Xbox's proprietary like like
Dude, that's
Series
so
X storage, like with Seagate and whatnot.
predatory.
It's so
Yeah.
funny, man. The fact that that's even a thing. But yeah, I'm pretty sure you could put. I think you can like replace the SSD in like a PlayStation pretty easily, if I'm not mistaken. Something like that, like a PS5.
Yeah, I think you might be able to. I mean, technically, you can switch up and use a USB. I mean, I was doing it on the Xbox Series X, using a USB for all my games that I was emulating.
Yeah,
I never really tried it with like the new titles because I definitely know that's illegal, but I'm sure there's a workaround somewhere.
yeah, sure there is.
In the end, it's just all computer programming. There
Yeah,
are ways to break things.
yeah. As a programmer, I fully aware, so I totally get that. Um, But yeah, I mean, your batteries will soon be replaceable, Mike. I think is the best way to sum up this article. Um, yeah, we're gonna see a huge wave of more control to the consumer, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank you, EU. Very cool.
I'm very excited, man, because I did have a little bit of a thought of like, well, they're just gonna make crappier batteries so people just buy new ones more and more frequently, kind of thing.
Yeah,
But then the comment about, well, there might be some third party sellers that will make better batteries that last longer. It's
yeah.
like, oh yeah, that's a good point.
Which I feel like is always the case for a lot of these electronics.
Oh
Especially
yeah,
for like
definitely.
phone cables and stuff. Like the default
Phone cables were
standard
the big
like
one.
charging cable you get with
Trash.
your phone is like always trash, and then you get like actual good ones. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
the
but
threaded. That's the
yeah,
way to go.
dude. I'll
The
say right now,
threaded
dude. If
and
you
lights up. Look at this.
Yeah,
Lights
dude.
up.
I'm a proponent. If you ever need like a phone charging cable, dude, always look at Anchor. They make good Lightning,
Yes, they
USB
do.
C, like
Oh yeah,
micro USB. I mean, it's all fantastic. I love Anchor, so I don't know.
that's a good point.
You know, obviously we're not sponsored, but that's what I'm saying. Whoever want a cable
I mean,
sponsor,
they want,
hey, hit us
I
up,
mean, if they
Anchor.
want to.